We actually have a guest today. That's Steve Soukup. He's actually author of The Dictatorship of Woke Capital. We wanted to invite him on to talk about Disney because, of course, Disney is also shooting itself in the foot. Disney, of course, came out with their, quote unquote, not so secret homosexual agenda. They're talking about making every character trans or gay or whatever else like that, right? Basically running a not so secret agenda, a political agenda to sexualize children, which started the argument around Disney grooming kids. A lot of this began, or at least came to headlines in Florida, where again, Governor DeSantis passed a bill restricting kids from kindergarten through third grade from getting like explicit sexual education, and also restricting them from, making it so that if they have to, if the school wants to make a gender reassignment therapy, i.e. chop off their genitals or whatever like that, or give them puberty blockers, the schools have to tell the parents. They called that the Don't Say Gay bill, of course, politically, but really it was more like the Don't Groom Your Kids bill. We've invited Steve Soukup to come talk to us about this because apparently this is not the first time Disney has done something like this. And while there's an argument as well on whether or not this is censorship or whether this is, again, a political organization masquerading as a business, and this whole kind of industrial complex again to influence our politics. So, Steve, let's invite you on now if you're there.
I'm here. Thank you for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
Hey, Steve, real pleasure. Yeah. So again, you talk about your book, and it seems the timing of this was very good because, again, you have the Mickey Mouse sign here, and Disney's, of course, in the headlines. Let's start by talking about kind of where things are at. Elon Musk, and folks, we'll go more into Durham after this, but I want to go on this first. Of course, Elon Musk is in the headlines right now. People are saying, he's trying to end censorship, but didn't people just censor Disney? And I know there's a lot of arguments on this because people are saying, well, Disney is very politically active. Steve, what's your take on this? Would you call the actions against Disney censorship? How would you compare that to the whole Twitter argument?
The two have nothing to do with one another. The idea that this is censorship of Disney is ridiculous. Disney, in the person of CEO Bob Chapek, specifically said that they wished to undermine and to change the law democratically passed by the Florida legislature and signed by the duly elected Florida governor, that they intended to change that bill, and they would stop at nothing to do so, specifically to placate some of their angrier employees. That's a different thing than simply articulating speech. That's a promise to undermine the democratic process. Everything, and I got just a little bit of the discussion you were having before you had me on. Everything that the left talks about with respect to disinformation is precisely what Disney was trying to do in that case. They were spreading their disinformation. They were trying to make it seem as if this was a law that targets gay people, that targets transgender children, that targets people who are outside of what most people consider the normal sexual boundaries. And that's not what it was at all. This was simply a bill about what students should be exposed to with respect to heterosexuality, homosexuality, any sort of sexual content in public schools. And Disney has threatened to undermine the legally, democratically passed laws of the state of Florida in order to pursue this disinformation. And so there's no comparison whatsoever with censorship or what's happening at Twitter.
This is interesting. So this sounds a lot more than like a political issue than just like a censorship or like, a censorship issue or them trying to shut down discussion on like homosexuality. It seems like Disney is actually trying to manipulate politics. Do they have that kind of power? Like what can Disney do to impact politics?
Well, Disney apparently does not have that kind of power. They've tried and they've tried and they've tried to change the way politics functions in some of the states where they do business. And they were successful once and they failed at least twice. In 2017, the state of Georgia passed a religious liberty law that a lot of people on the left in particular thought would be very aggressive in allowing people to discriminate. And so some of the entertainment companies in Georgia that do a lot of business in Georgia, including Disney, which films most of its films and produces most of its movies in Georgia, led the charge against this bill. And they were successful, and they convinced the governor not to sign it. 2 years later, the new governor, Brian Kemp, signed a fetal heartbeat law, which would prevent abortion in the state after a fetal heartbeat could be heard. And again, the entertainment companies in Georgia, starting with Disney, protested and insisted that they were going to leave the state unless the state rescinded the law. And Bob Iger, who was at the time the CEO of Disney, stamped his feet and hollered and screamed and said, "This is going to be dangerous to our employees." And Governor Kemp said, "I don't care what you say. I disagree with you, and this is the democratic will of the people of Georgia." And he signed the law. Bob Iger did nothing. As it turns out, the law is currently in the judicial process and probably is never going to be fully enacted. But at the same time, the governor defied Disney and Disney did nothing. So again, when they stamped their feet and hollered and screamed in Florida, the governor defied them and said, "Look, this is a political matter. This is a democratic matter. This is not your issue."
Well, it's interesting too, because you were saying that, basically Disney declared that they were going to overturn this democratically created law, as you mentioned. And that, in other words, it kind of messes with the narrative that a lot of people have been pushing, that, we have to defend democracy. This is a threat to democracy and all these things. Of course, again, folks, we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, right? But of course, they're talking about the will of the people and the will of the people to vote on things. And the real irony here, as far as I see it, is, and the other, aside from the whole defending democracy thing, and as you've explained, Disney seems to be intent on doing this, is that people talk about oligarchy, and I wonder sometimes if they get what that means, because, it's basically businesses having so much power that they have sway over politics. And isn't that what Disney's trying to do here? They're trying to work as like an oligarchic power to control politics?
Yeah, absolutely. The ruling class's definition of oligarchy is when a billionaire they don't like controls something. When billionaires they like are in power and are trying to affect political change, that's fine with them. It's just the billionaires they don't like that they have a problem with. But yeah, Bob Iger is at least a centimillionaire, if not a billionaire, from the work that he has done at Disney. Bob Chapek, again, the same thing, is a centimillionaire from what he has earned working at Disney. These are very wealthy men who have decided that the democratically enacted will of the people is wrong and that they need to change it. So if you're looking for a textbook definition of oligarchy, you have it right here in Disney's behavior.
Let's continue this a bit more, because, I mean, like you're saying, it seems like the political narratives that we're being told, I mean, the two big ones that they've been playing up recently are like defending democracy. We have to stop oligarchs and billionaires from controlling our politics. But again, as you mentioned, it does seem to be the case that this is actually more about political interest than it is about actual, democracy or voting or free information or anything like that, or oligarchy for that matter as well. Talking about Disney, I mean, how would you describe like the nature of Disney in terms of politics? I mean, you of course has a book on woke capital. A lot of people equate wokeness with kind of this anti-capitalist move. How does woke and capitalism kind of go together with Disney?
Well, the description that I use for woke capital and that I spell out in the book is a top-down anti-democratic movement by some of the biggest names in American business to change the way business functions, to change the relationship between business and its customers, and most importantly, to change the relationship between the citizen and the state. And that's precisely what Disney has done for the last 10, 15, 20 years, has involved itself in politics specifically to change the relationship between the citizen and the state.
Explain that a bit more. What do you mean by changing the relationship between the citizen and the state? That's interesting.
Well, as we went through in Disney, the democratically elected legislature of Florida passed a bill. The democratically elected governor of Florida signed that bill. This is a legal Democratic Republican bill that has been passed with the consent of the people, as our institutions function in this country. And Disney threw a fit about it. Disney does not like for the people, apparently, to have their say. What Disney wants is for the world to function in its chosen manner, and for the people to do as they say, rather than for the people to express their own will. And so by threatening to undermine this duly passed law in the state of Florida, what Disney has done is tried to undermine the will of the people.